Hello and welcome to the Global Poker League and our strategy segment where we ask our guest pro to take us through a hand from the GPL. Joined today by Jonathan Little of the Las Vegas Moneymakers. He's going to take us through a hand from the Eurasian Six Max between Fabrice Soulier and Brian Rast. This match was a Six Max, but we are heads up between the Paris Aviators and the Berlin Bears. Jonathan, this is a hand which interested you from this match. What happened in this one?
Well, this hand may not look that interesting, but right here we are playing 20 big blinds deep. Fabrice elects to limp with his Queen 10 offsuit, and I think that's perfectly fine. The reason you want to be limping these hands sometimes is because you don't want to raise to, say, 6,000 or 7,000, and then have Brian Rast go all in, and then you have to fold out a pretty good hand like Queen 10. It's not quite good enough to raise and then call an all in. So what's the alternative? You could limp, and then if Brian Rast raises to, say, 8,500 like he does, now you can call in position, which is perfectly acceptable. Or you could fold, and folding Queen 10 is just way too tight. So you always want to look at all of your alternatives. You could also just go all in. I think that would not be insane, but I like having a limping range here. It's going to make you somewhat difficult to play against, so I like that. So Brian Rast does raise this 5-4 suited, which is a little bit loose, but acceptable. I'm not going to be questioning what Brian Rast does too much. Brian Rast is one of the best players in the world. This is a hand that flops well enough, and maybe he thinks he can push Fabrice around after the flop some portion of the time. So Fabrice thinks for a bit and then calls, which seems great. Then the flop comes 8-8-7. This may not look like a flop that connects too well with Fabrice, but it's actually pretty good. As you can see, versus this total garbage, he has 66% equity, which is a bunch, right? He's nowhere near drawing dead. And even if Brian Rast has a hand like Ace-4 or Ace-King, he still has a pretty good amount of equity. So after a bit of thought, Brian Rast is going to put out a continuation bet. And then it's on Fabrice, and he has to decide if he wants to stick around or if he just wants to fold. And I think a lot of players look at this spot and think, well, I have queen high, I have to get out of the way, what else am I going to do? And in reality, with his backdoor flush draw, his backdoor straight draw, his overcards, all of that combined gives him a pretty good amount of equity. Whenever Brian Rast makes that bet, I missed the sizing, but Fabrice is going to need to win about 25% of the time to justify calling. And also, because Fabrice is in position, he's going to win the pot sometimes whenever Brian Rast just checks the turn and gives up. So this is a spot where Fabrice is either going to make the best hand some portion of the time or steal the pot some portion of the time to where it's worth it for him to call and see what develops. If you're folding too often to just pre-flop raises and continuation bets, you're going to end up playing too tightly and your opponent's just going to be able to run you over. And that's a big problem in heads up. You have to make sure you're always defending often enough to where your opponent cannot blindly run you over.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. That's all for this hand. Join us again next time, the Global Poker League. Adios. Connect with us on social media for league updates and download our app, GPL TV, to stay on top of everything GPL.